So that's that one. We got a bonus round here tonight. Got a 2004 Pilot EX with a misfire and a mill. We take a look at the freeze frame for this misfire. We got a PO301. So we have a cylinder number 1 misfire. It happened about 2,800 RPM, going 61 miles an hour. Now, this guy was hammering down pretty good on his car when he set this misfire code. Now, when we look at the fuel trim, we're seeing some numbers here that are really not indicative of a fuel issue, because if we were not getting enough fuel to one or more cylinders, the deal would be that you'd have a significant amount of fuel add going on. Now, of course, an ignition misfire is going to look pretty similar to this. You're not going to really be able to pick out an ignition misfire and fuel trim, because it doesn't affect ignition that much. Excuse me, ignition doesn't affect fuel trim that much. Sorry. So we get the engine in the bay, and the technician does something we've all done, and that is power brake the engine while it's in the bay. Now, my advice on power braking in the bay, from personal experience, is always use the gear position that leads the vehicle away from your own toolbox. And if you want to know how I know to do that, it's not a pretty story, but I was power braking a car, and it was going the wrong direction. But at any rate, the car does misfire in the bay while he power brakes it, and so he shuts it down, pulls out a spark plug, and says, you know what, these plugs are worn, and I'm not going to spend time trying to diagnose a car. It just needs maintenance. So they sell him a set of plugs, and they put them in, and while the guy's putting in the plugs, he makes a decision that he's going to move the number 1 ignition coil over to the next position. Now, in his mind, just in case he was wrong and it needs a coil-on plug assembly, he's covered, because what's going to happen when he starts the car back up is he's going to get a misfire on a different cylinder. So he gets done with it. The engine misfires. The mill comes on. The 301 returns, so it's not the coil-on plug. And so now he decides he's going to reach in and disconnect the EGR valve and drive the car again. And the misfire, lo and behold, stops. So he replaces the EGR valve, which I've seen done. I'm not recommending that at this point, because many of you already know we're going to go look in a different area for this problem. The problem is repeats, of course, because the EGR valve feeds EGR in all the cylinders. Well, the problem is in the EGR ports again. This is a different type of problem. I've described it, but our first car had one where one cylinder was plugged and the rest were flowing. And in this case, we have most of the cylinders plugged, and one of them is nice and open. So when you accelerate, EGR valve opens, and most of the EGR goes right in that cylinder, which happens to be number 1. So that's going to give us this misfire. Now, I just wanted to mention, this is 2009, and they have not changed their mind about high side control for EGR. So the solenoid is grounded, and then the PCM controls the power to the solenoid. And I'm hitting on this more than once, you notice, because I don't want anybody to blow up PCM while they're trying to fix an EGR valve. It just would be a bad day for everybody. So just remember, high side drivers are out there. Tons of cars use high side drivers, and I have found that the Asian vehicles in particular are somewhat negligent on current protecting their driver outputs. So we don't want to cause damage while we're trying to do a diagnosis.